So your ideal posture is sometimes hard to know because your ideal posture might not be exactly textbook posture. And part of that has to do with how much range of motion and flexibility you have in specific muscles and joints in your body in order to get as close to that textbook ideal posture as possible. So when we are in our ideal posture, that puts our joints and our muscles in their ideal positions. And I call that position the position of least stress. In school, when we learn this in school, we talk about a resting position for the joints. And that basically means the joints are in a position where they have the least amount of compression or the least amount of stress on the joints. So I call it the position of least stress because this applies to the joints and the muscles. So a joint's position of least stress would be somewhere in the middle of how far it can bend one way and how far it can bend the other way. So if I can bend my wrist way this far back and I can bend it this far forward, then its position of least stress is going to be somewhere in the middle there. And that's going to be the least amount of compression in that joint and the least amount of chance for that joint to get pinched, I guess I would say. Then the muscles also have a position of least stress or the position of most efficiency. So when muscles are in a lengthened position and they sit in a longer position from where they start and where they end, then they're sort of on a constant stretch sort of sensation, and then they don't function as well. So they're not in their ideal position to function because they're too long, and then that muscle is inhibited or shut off, like the dimmer switch just turned down and the muscle can't function right. And when that muscle is in a shortened position, then it starts to adaptively shorten, and it also can't function as well because it's too short, and those muscle fibers are kind of bunched up on themselves, and it's not going to contract efficiently. So the muscle also needs to be in a position, in some kind of a mid position, for it to function the best. So I call that position the position of least stress for the joint and the muscle. So to give you an example, if we hang out in positions that put the joints and the muscles too far away from the position of least stress, then we set them up for failure. So that's why the tips on getting up and moving every 30 minutes and the movement and variety of positioning and those things, because if we hang out in a bad position for too long, then and the muscle and the joint is in an end range position, then that's going to start to build up some stress in those tissues, and it's not gonna like that. It's going to start talking to you. So an example would be like text neck. So if I'm constantly looking down in this position, usually slumped a little bit here, then the muscles and the soft tissue and the ligaments on the back side of my neck are going to be kind of chronically lengthened. So I'm going away from this curve, and so that means that those joints in there are getting in a far lengthened position to the forward, and the muscles on the back are getting stretched into a lengthened position. And so if I stay there for a good amount of time, then it starts to sort of kind of stretch in that position, and then they're not going to function as well. And so that's when we need to correct and get back in our position of least stress. And second example would be like the common, like a laptop position where you're sort of kind of tipping your head up. If I'm tipping my head up, particularly if I have vision issues and I'm looking through the bottom of my glasses like me, if I tip my head up to read and I'm kind of bringing my shoulders forward and my head is up, that's going to put all the muscles up in here in a shortened position. So they're short, and so they're not in their ideal position to function because they're kind of bunched up on themselves. And then these joints here are also kind of compressing because they're bending backwards. And then there's compression in that joint and compression in these spaces. and that's going to eventually not feel good, and it's harder to get out of those positions. So the solution to combat those end range positions is to learn what I call vertical lengthening. So you want to be aware of always trying to vertically lengthen your body. And so the thought, lots of different keywords to think about in order to try to trigger this sort of response in yourself, but one is just back of the skull. You want to visualize the back of the skull kind of rising up to the ceiling. Or ponytail, I'm kind of grabbing the hair at the base of the neck and kind of tugging up. And then what happens is, and you can kind of see it, if I just sort of, if I'm fatiguing and sinking a little bit, if I just think tug up on the back of the skull, up, 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 then the back of my head starts to go towards the ceiling, the back of my neck lengthens out, my chin comes down a tiny bit, and then if you noticed, this area also went back into more of a position of least stress instead of being in this end range position where it's going to get tired and achy as well. So just thinking that one thought can help correct and get you oriented to what your position of least stress is.